Finding the perfect crosshair for you is a daunting task. With so many options available, it's hard to pick out what's good and what's bad. In this video, I will be guiding you through all the crosshair options in Valorant. At the end of the video, I'm showing off a bunch of custom crosshairs that you can use if you like, or adjust them to your own personal preference. Let's get right into the video. Alright, so I'm just in the firing range right now. I'm going to be currently on the default crosshair. If you want to go to the default crosshair settings, you can just hit reset crosshair to default. Now keep in mind, the secret to the perfect crosshair is that there is none. It is all personal preference. Whatever works for you is what the best for you is going to be. So we'll start off with the crosshair color. They give you a whole list of options. I would personally recommend that you stick to white, green, cyan, and red. The other colors can be quite distracting or blend into the maps too well. As for outlines, this will add an outline to your crosshair. If you want it, go for it. Especially I'd recommend if you're going to be using a crosshair like yellow, where it can blend into the map very easily. If you have an outline, it can make it much easier to distinguish it from the background. The outline thickness is going to do as it says. It changes the outline thickness. I would recommend just leaving it at 1. Any crosshair where you increase the thickness, it just gets way too distracting and also looks really ugly. For a center dot, it'll just add a dot to the center of your crosshair. If that helps you line up shots better, I would highly recommend using it. Especially for beginners, it can help to have that dot give a literal exact location of where the center of your screen is. The center dot opacity is just going to change how much you see the dot. If you just want to have it a little bit but not fully visible, you can turn it down and see how you can still kind of see it, but it's just much faded. As for center dot thickness, I would recommend keeping this the same as your crosshair thickness, which I'll get into in 1 second, so that way that the lines and the dot are the same size. Fade crosshair with firing error is on by default. Now, if you don't know what that does, when you have a gun and you start spraying, once it becomes fully inaccurate, the top of the crosshair will actually disappear. Show spectated players crosshair is also on by default. I personally don't like this option. I like to see my crosshair and my crosshair only. What this will do is when you die in a match and you're spectating your teammates, it'll show you what crosshair they're using. Disable crosshair, obviously keep this off. If you turn it on, you will have no crosshair. No matter what settings you have, it will turn your crosshair off. Okay, so that was the general settings. Now we'll be moving on to the inner lines. There's 2 more things. So there's inner lines and there's outer lines. They both essentially do the same thing, but you can essentially have 2 different crosshair layers, I guess I would say the word. Personally, for me, I like to turn all the outer lines off and just screw with the inner line settings. So that's what I'll be showing for the rest of this video. If you want though, feel free to screw around with the outer lines. There are some cool crosshairs where you can use both the inner and outer lines, and it will make a really cool design or a really cool crosshair. So what we're going to do is go right to inner line opacity. I would recommend not putting this any lower than about 0.75. Any lower than that and the crosshair is just going to be kind of too faded and it might blend in too well with the background. So I'd recommend keeping it at 0.75 as the lowest, but I personally like to play on 1. I'm also going to go ahead and put the outline opacity all the way up to 1, because if I ever play with an outline, I do like it all the way up. For the length, this is where it really gets into personal preference. I would say obviously don't have it at 0 because the crosshair won't exist. 1 is pretty small, but there are some crosshairs where you will use a 1 length, which I will show later. But as a general recommendation, I would say keep the length between 3 and 8. Any more than 8 and the crosshair will take up too much of your screen. Any lower than 3 and it's just kind of too small. If you do like 1 or 2 though, go for it. And if you do like a huge crosshair like this, go for it as well. But for the general population of players, I would recommend keeping it between 3 and 8. Now for the outer line thickness, I would also not recommend going to 0 because crosshair won't exist. So I would say keep it somewhere between 1 and 3. Any more than 3 and the crosshair just gets a little too fat and is just kind of hard to see because it can obscure a lot of your vision, whether someone's peeking you or whatnot. So once again, just keep it between 1 or 3. With the inner line offset, this will change the gap of your crosshair. Obviously, the bigger the number, the bigger the gap will be. I wouldn't recommend setting it too high, as it'll be hard to detect where the exact center of your screen is. So with movement error, if you have this on, while you move, it will actually show you how inaccurate you are. So if you want to be able to see when you are accurate and when you aren't, go ahead and turn it on. I would recommend it for new players, but as you learn the gun mechanics more and more, I would recommend turning this off, as it can be a major distraction. Now, firing error is similar to movement error, and what it'll do, I'll turn off movement error here. What firing error does is when you shoot, the crosshair will open and it'll show you how inaccurate you become. So the bigger the gap becomes, the more inaccurate you're going to be. Once again, same with movement error. If you're a newer player, you can go ahead and turn it on, but as you become more and more skilled, I would recommend turning it off, as it can be distracting. And then, like I stated earlier, I'm not going to screw around with the outer lines because it's basically the exact same as inner lines, except you can make a second layer to your crosshair. And now that I showed you guys how to screw around with all the settings and find your personal favorite, I'm going to throw up a montage of just a bunch of different crosshairs with their settings. As always, just a last reminder, crosshairs is all preference. Use whatever you like, try new ones, and once you find what you like, try to keep with it so you're as consistent as possible. And let's roll the montage. If you enjoyed the video and are part of the 86% of people who watch my videos but are not subscribed, consider subscribing to the channel, drop a like if the video helped, and check out my links in the description below. I stream on Twitch every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I also upload on TikTok, and I have a Twitter as well for updates. Thank you guys all for sticking around, and have a great rest of your day.